Hello, I'm Dario Barter with the Global Post Confederation. I am here today with Matt Tripodi, Global Account Director at Euromonitor International. Euromonitor is a leading independent provider of strategic market research, and Matt has more than 20 years of experience in research and strategy consulting for clients in both the public and private sectors. Matt, it's good to have you with us today.
Thanks, Dario. Nice to be with you.
Thanks, Matt. So we're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the future of the pulse industry. And to begin with, Matt, could you tell us a little bit about your personal and professional background?
Yeah, personal background is I work out of our Chicago office in a small town outside of Austin, Texas, Dripping Springs. So we automatically have social distancing here. It's more country and hills than anything else. And professional background, I've been in research for over 2 decades, almost 25 years now. A lot of that was helping to support major management and strategy consulting firms, such as the Boston Consulting Group, Booz Allen Hamilton, what became the Accenture arm of Arthur Andersen. And now I help governments and trade associations expand trade globally through Euromonitor's data systems.
And Matt, could you tell us a little bit, kind of give us an overview of Euromonitor International's work?
Sure. Euromonitor is the largest independent strategic consumer insights company in the world. We've got on-the-ground research teams in 15 countries. If offices in 15 countries, on-the-ground research teams in 100 countries. And essentially we have 28 major data modules that track the movement of products and services all around the world so that you can understand demand dynamics, what's being purchased, how fast things are growing, what consumers are migrating to and from. And this helps companies in their strategic planning processes to really identify where the opportunities are, where the constraints are, and how to overcome those constraints.
And Matt, getting to the pandemic, so in several parts of the world, we're seeing a dramatic increase in retail sales of pulses, right? And I understand this is something you saw coming. How is it that you predicted it?
Well, part of that was a visit to the grocery store and witnessing it. But sometimes research is really based on some very deep insight about markets and market conditions. This was really something that was kind of obvious to me, and I think obvious to some other people, was that we were witnessing consumers moving toward being isolated, being at home. They were concerned for their safety or their security, and they were stocking food and avoiding perishables, looking for shelf-stable products. And we began to witness the movement of canned goods and bagged goods, shelf-stable product into the pantries and into the homes of consumers. And as a shelf-stable product, pulses, are something that can hold up for a long period of time and kind of met the need at the moment.
And here at the GPC, we're concerned about the impact of the pandemic on trade. So there's been disruptions in shipping, and some countries are banning exports for food security reasons. And could you speak to these and other impacts you're seeing on the pulse trade?
Sure. Well, globally, the numbers are not good for international trade right now. The projections of global GDP. There's definitely, we're on a path to every region of the world, with the exception of Asia, going into the negative GDP. So contraction in GDP. Within trade, we're talking about contraction of anywhere from 13 to maybe 32% by some estimates, which is quite significant when you consider, we're talking about international trade being somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 million or $20 trillion. So this is a huge number that we're talking about, and that contraction, I think, is it's going to take a while for that to kind of bounce back. I would mention that on the food security front, disruptions in supply chains are very worrisome to a lot of markets around the world that depend on the flow of food via international trade. And there is a lot of concern right now about whether or not people are going to be able to get the food that they actually need. So there's lots of discussion happening about keeping trade open, keeping the movement of goods flowing, but it's yet to be seen how that's all going to play out. I expect that there are going to be some very challenging times. I think that there are going to be people that are going to continue to go without certain types of products. And in certain markets, it may even turn desperate. Hopefully, they move beyond that quickly and we get product flowing.
And at the same time, and I guess this is more long-term, you mentioned that COVID-19 pandemic, you see it kind of as an accelerator of consumers adapting kind of a pulse-rich diet.
Yeah, it's weird how these things sometimes work out, right? And if you think about this, that there are a couple of major things that have surfaced out of COVID-19. One is the search by governments and countries for safety for their consumers and security for their economy. Right? So safety and security is heavily sought right now all around the world. And you can see that playing out in your local neighborhood. You can see it playing out when you maybe perhaps go to a market and they're having you sanitize your hands before you come into the store, or you can see it playing out in government recommendations about hand washing and those sorts of things. It's no different in the the sort of international supply side of the business. And so what we see with pulses is that pulses are actually beginning to speak to and are being highlighted, kind of reintroduced to consumers around the world via COVID, where they might not have been purchasing beans or lentils or chickpeas. Consumers went out and said, I need to stock up on these things. I need this safety and security brought into my house. Oh, and by the way, it's a healthy product. This matches my desire to stay healthy, right? Or it matches my desire to just be secure, right? So what this is effectively done is reintroduced pulses to the world. It's helped them engage pulses. I think, and we're seeing it in the numbers that are starting to come out, engaging pulses in a more frequent fashion. And because of that, when the whole issue of COVID gets resolved, the tendency to move toward pulses is not, expected to really go away. It may lessen somewhat. But since they've been introduced and since people have figured out, how do I work with pulses? What do I do? How can they benefit me? They're going to go to those pulses, continue to go to them at a greater level. So it's resetting the base level of demand.
It's interesting because I saw a news report today actually about consumers in Asia specifically kind of rethinking their diets with the origins of where this pandemic came from, and going maybe more plant-based. Could you talk a little bit, give us a sense of the size of the opportunity you think here for the pulse industry in terms of the growing plant-based segment?
Sure. Euromonitor's numbers, for plant-based, meat alternatives. For China, we're already north of $10 billion. It's a pretty substantial thing when you think about what $1 billion actually is. Moreover, when you reference the idea of safety and security, in the largest market in the world, right? China, you've got India kind of vying for that largest market in the world. But China is a place where food security hasn't always been present. Okay, they've had in past years they've had baby food scares where contaminated baby food has caused health problems and death for children. There have been pet food contaminations where pets have lost their life. So there is a certain level of distrust and skepticism about food in one of the major markets in the world, China. And when you have COVID-19 come into place, right, there are concerns that it might be coming from animal consumption of animal products, right? Becomes this, again, flight from insecurity to security, all move to plant-based protein, right? And this is another one of those sort of elements of it being an accelerator of adoption for pulses and pulse products. That market was expected to grow about $3 billion over the next handful of years. This could easily, push that, and it could grow, another 50 to 100%, even beyond that number. There are plants. There's a plant-based pork operation that is going to be launching in China, and you see that the market is not just engaging this in a temporary way. They're engaging it as a new opportunity, an important opportunity that they need to address. And so these, again, are all, accelerators for the adoption of pulses.
And where do you see we have alt meat, right? We have pulse ingredients. What do you see as the fastest growing segments, and in what countries do you see as the biggest market opportunities?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna put it out there at a regional. Well, I'm gonna take that in kind of reverse order. I'll put it out there at a regional level. If you just generally speaking, and I should say that nobody knows the exact number. Okay, people look to the research organizations of the world. They look to government. They look to all these groups, and the fact of the matter is, well, let's keep it a secret. Shh. Nobody really knows what the number is. But what we can say is, if you looked at North America, the European Union, and in Asia, that you can kind of cut up the world into nearly equal parts, a third, a third, a third, for pulses. Okay, and that, pulses consumed at an ingredient level, but when it comes to pulses consumed in whole format, of course, you're dealing with the major population centers of the world where pulses have been historically part of their diet. So the real key markets to focus on: North America, European Union, and Asia. And Asia is the growth market, and one of the reasons for that is population. And population is another one of those accelerators. And I would share this with everyone, is that what we're witnessing with population growth is that essentially between now and 2050, 1/3 of the world's population by 2050 is not here presently. So 1 out of every 3 people that will be in this world by 2050, they're not here yet. So the pulse industry is positioning itself so that when those people come into this world and they're being born, coming in, that pulses are already a part of their daily life. Okay? And this is where the great growth factor takes place. Most of that growth is in Asia. It's not in the European Union. It's not in North America. So you're going to see Asia over time, move ahead. And eventually, you're going to see this kind of bleed over into, the Middle East and African markets as well. That population growth, that's what people need to be targeting. Pulse industry needs to be embedding itself into the lifestyle of consumers today. COVID-19 is helping, but more can be done. Key product areas. They're the ones that many of you already know about. The people that will be listening. It's bakery. There are noodles. There are health and wellness segments. The whole protein sector. The health and wellness movement is very alive, very substantial. Beyond this, we have a huge market opportunity in sectors related to veganism. Many of the major markets in the world have a substantial portion of their population, 2.5% to upwards of 13 to 14%, that indicate that they are vegan. This includes the United States, it includes Germany, it includes the UK, India, of course, who's by far and away the leader in that space, but China. Germany indicates over 4% of their population is vegan. So this wasn't the case 10, 20 years ago. And now the pulse industry has this great opportunity to service this market and the population that's coming online.
So with this great opportunity that's accelerating now, what advice do you have for the pulse industry?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dario. Thanks for asking that. There's a really interesting thing. So I work, part of my background is that I do a lot of work with these government organizations, including the USDA and major trade associations around the world. One of those groups is the international, that I've worked with, is the International Beef Alliance. The International Beef Alliance is a really interesting organization because it's made up of major exporting countries for the beef industry. And they got together and they said, well, look, we're going to collaborate when it makes sense to collaborate, and we're going to compete when it makes sense to compete. The purpose of this is that it allows the beef industry to react to global market conditions when a market says that perhaps beef is bad for your heart, or beef is environmentally isn't sustainable, or it's frankly no good for the environment. Then the International Beef Alliance quickly comes together. They determine, here's this issue, how should we respond to it? And then they respond to it in a unified fashion globally. By doing so, they're able to shape the perceptions of consumers, put out fires very quickly. And if you can imagine the pulse industry, at some point in time, right, we're likely to have peas, for example, potentially labeled as an allergen, right, on the back of packaging. What would that do to the industry? How does the industry want to respond to that at a global level? How do they want to manage the marketing message of that, especially in light of the fact that up until this point, they haven't been saying that. They've been saying we're allergen friendly, right? What happens if, if certain markets are closed down to pulses for some reason? How does the industry want to manage the messaging? Rather than having 10 or 20 different messages coming together and saying, this is our message. This is why we're going to message it this way, and this is how it's going to benefit all of us globally. That's something that I think that the pulse industry can benefit from. The industry is coming to a new level. When you look at global pulse flour exports or demand from last year, estimates ranged from like 12.9 billion all the way up to almost 32 billion, and from different research organizations. The numbers are huge. Even at their most conservative level, this would have made, if it was a Fortune 500 company, would have made, Global Pulse Flour Company Inc. It would have been on the Fortune 500 list, and it would have been company number 219. It would have been ahead of Estee Lauder. It would have been ahead of Kellogg. I mean, the industry has grown itself kind of in an organic fashion. Sure, there's been focus, but there hasn't been a global unification quite yet. And I think in the next level, that global unification will be important to help promote the industry globally and deal with the challenges, future challenges that are going to happen. So that's what I would highlight.
It's been fascinating talking with you, Matt, and we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Dario. And I don't know if they can see your shirt, but I got the memo, and really glad we dressed alike for this discussion. Hey, Dario, could I chip in one last final comment?
Sure, go ahead. Yes, please.
And the global pulse industry is finally coming out from underneath a rock. I'm not sure that everyone really recognizes the enormity of what is happening. They're really big numbers. We're talking billions of dollars worth of growth, very conservatively, just in, for example, pulse flour as an ingredient. That can very easily grow $1.7 to $4.2 billion this year globally, just as a single ingredient. And so we're talking about these ingredients. We're talking about pulses. All of them are immensely valuable to the world, and all of them are gaining a level of traction in different places of the world in varying degrees, but that are collectively resulting in billions and billions of dollars worth of growth. And so I'm hoping everybody that's out there is playing in thinking about what's going on and what it means for the pulse industry. The future for pulses, I think, is bright. Weather the storm of COVID and the supply chain disruptions. On the other side of this are consumers waiting for more pulses.
Thanks again, Matt. Thanks so much.
Sure, you're welcome, Dario.
Great, and thanks to all of you for watching.